Hello and welcome to another edition of A View from the Hill. My name is Brad Hill and I am the state representative for the 4th Essex District, and we try and have a view from the Hill about once a month so that we can bring up some issues of the day. And one of the big issues of the day as we're getting ready or closer to the presidential election is, for the first time, we are going to have early voting here in Massachusetts. Back in 2014, there was a big push to add this early voting piece to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts law, and we had a big debate about it at the House and in the Senate. And in 2014, our former Governor Deval Patrick signed into law that we would have early voting starting with this upcoming presidential election. So to explain what that means to the voters, I have invited a very special guest, our town clerk here in the town of Ipswich, Pam, who is going to explain to us exactly what early voting is and how that may be different from what we've been used to over the past few years, and if I dare say, past decades. It's going to be a much different way of voting for those of you who can't make it on election day but want to be able to vote in the upcoming presidential election. So, can we just be a blunt question, what is early voting?
Early voting allows a person to vote before Election Day. It differs from absentee voting in that absentee voting requires that the person have an excuse. There are 3 excuses the state recognizes. The first is a physical disability. The second is a religious belief that prohibits you from attending the polls. And the third is that the person will be out of town the entire day on Election Day.
So in the past, to kind of close the loop, so in order for us to be able to do any early voting in the past, you would have to fill out an application and get it what is known as an absentee ballot. With this new law in place, does the absentee ballot now become defunct, or do you still get a absentee ballot, and in addition you can do?
No. An absentee ballot is an excused absence for some reason. Early voting just opens up and eliminates these excuses. So we have both absentee and early voting. Early voting, you will be able to come into a designated location and cast your ballot as you would in the polls. The designated location for Ipswich is the town hall. And our plan is to have it in the gym. And people would come in, fill out an envelope with their name and address. That name and address must be the exact same name and address as appears on our voting list. The person is given a ballot. They go to the ballot booths, cast their ballot, put it in their envelope, seal the envelope, and we will have a person at the end of those booths collecting the ballots, and the voter can actually just put it in a designated box that we're going to have. It's not the same voting machine that we have at the polls. The state hasn't allowed that in their new laws. However, we will take those to the polls and process them as we process the absentees.
So there's 2 very different ways of being able to vote in the next upcoming presidential election.
Yes.
And I think people need to understand, because it was a question that I actually had when we were debating this issue, is does the absentee ballot now become invalid? So can you explain to us exactly what an absentee ballot is for those of who have never actually applied for one?
Well, the absentee ballot is used only when you have when you satisfy those 3 excuses. This one expands it expands absentee balloting to waive those excuses. So it's the same principle, but some people like to just come into the poll and have the ballot go in, check in, have the ballot cast there. There is also in the early voting, you can mail in for a ballot, but I caution people on the mail-in early voting ballot because when you return that ballot, you must, by this new statute, return it yourself. It cannot be brought in by your spouse, your friend, your child. You must do it or we have to reject it.
But an absentee
But
ballot
an
can
absentee
be done that
ballot
way.
can be brought in by anyone. So unless you're going to come to the town hall and actually cast your ballot there, I would caution you about getting the mail-in early voting ballot. But certainly the mail-in absentee ballot, since it allows anyone to bring it back for you, I think is a really safe bet.
So to be clear, and again, this is very new to a lot of people, there are possibly two ways of applying for a mail-in vote.
Correct.
The new way of doing the early voting, which you just explained, and the absentee ballot. So it's a great conversation to have because I think people, again, don't understand if they have children who are off at college, if you have somebody who maybe is going to be working in another part of the country, you are probably saying to them you should probably be doing that in an absentee ballot.
Correct.
And not a voting because only you can bring back the early
Correct.
voting ballot.
Correct.
So I think people need to be very clear about what they will be asking for when that happens.
Yes.
So let's.
And if they call our office, we're really very happy to explain this and help them make the correct decision for their particular circumstance.
So give me the timing of the early voting.
Early voting will be held October 24th, which is a Monday, through November 4th, which is a Friday. We will have hours during regular business hours, Mondays 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays 8 to 4, and Fridays 8 to noon. And we're also going to open on Saturday the 29th for 4 hours, 9 to 1, for anyone who would like to come and early vote.
So I think people need to understand we're trying our best for those folks who truly don't believe that we give everybody an opportunity to vote, which is why this law was put into place. Is in other parts of the Commonwealth, people feel as though they're not having their right to vote, and by expanding these hours, they'll be able to. So to be clear, in the town of Ipswich, we're going to be opening up the gym at the town hall.
Correct.
You're going to bring in additional staff.
Correct.
To make sure that this runs smoothly. Due to the fact that this is probably obviously our first time voting, there will be some ups and downs that we're going to have to get through.
We hope very few.
As do we. I think we need to, again, be very clear about what does one have to do to early vote as compared to absentee ballot, because it is different.
It is very different. So absentee, you can fill out an application form. We check you against our system to make sure that how you're registered is what you have on your form. We give you the ballot. You can vote either in person at the town clerk's counter, or you can vote, you can have the ballot mailed to you. Early voting, you would come into the early voting area, which is the gym, except, let me clarify please, while I think of it, the Saturday hours, the gym is occupied, so we will be doing it at my office. So then the early voting, you would walk in as you would in the polls, and you would fill out an envelope just so we can keep the privacy of your vote.
Of the ballot.
Of the ballot, yep.
Okay. I know you touched upon it a little bit, but I think just to be clear for people to understand, once the early vote ballot is received, then how is it going to be counted? Because it will not be counted, as I understand it, in the gym the day they vote. It will be done the day of the election.
Correct. It will be done the day of the election. I have chosen, we have our option of either having what they're calling a central tabulation location, or we can have the ballots processed the same way we process the absentee ballots. The central tabulation process is what I've chosen because I think it's going to eliminate lines in the polling location. We will have a spare machine. We will open the envelopes, take them out without looking to see whose envelope we have, take them out of the envelope, the ballots, put them face down on a table. Once all those envelopes are open for precinct 1, we will feed those through our spare machine. We will do the same thing for the next 3 precincts, keep everything separately. At the end of the night, as we run the regular machines, we will run these. And we'll get a tape and have those totals at the end of the night. I'll come back to the office and combine them and put them on the website. Absentee ballots are processed in the regular precinct box and machine. So it tends to slow up the line. We try to do it when there's no one there and no voters are there. So you may see sometimes 2 poll workers checking in a name, and they'll step aside if a voter comes into the office. So we go to the check-in and the check-out at the polls for the absentee ballots and put them through the regular machine. The early voting machine will be in a separate section of the gym at the Y. And we'll open those envelopes also, but there will be nobody else coming in to vote on that machine. It will be just dedicated to the early voting. So it will speed up that process and not congest the line at the regular precincts.
Well, I know in the last presidential election we had the lines were out the door, and the traffic, as you know, because it was such a big election, went all the way down 133 and all the way into downtown area.
I suspect it'll be at least as bad because of this particular election. I believe we're going to have a larger turnout.
Let's talk about that in just a few minutes. But first, we want to take a couple of minutes to give you a public service announcement, and then we'll be right back to talk with Pam about more early voting. We are back on another edition of A View from the Hill, and we've been talking to our town clerk, Pam, about early voting. And she's been very good about updating us on the new law and what steps one must take in order to be able to vote early, either by absentee ballot or by coming to town hall before the election and voting in our gymnasium up in the town hall area. And on a Saturday, and yes, you heard that correctly, we are going to be allowing Ipswich residents to vote on a Saturday leading up to the presidential election, if that is something you see fit and would fit your schedule better than showing up on Election Day, which is this year, November 8th.
November 8th.
So make sure everybody knows November 8th is the big day for voting. Actually, when's the last day to register for the presidential election? Because I know there's a lot of kids in college and at the high school who are going to be turning 18 or have actually just turned 18, and they probably want to know when is the last day that they'd be able to register to vote.
The last day to register to vote is October 19th. I have arranged, as I normally do once a year, to hold a voter registration at the high school. So I am going on the 19th to the high school during their lunch.
Oh, nice.
And the 18-year-olds can register to vote for this election as long as they're going to be 18 by election day. And now we also have pre-registration. I'm
So,
sure you're
yes,
aware of.
I'm aware of it, but I'm not so sure that a lot of other people are, because that was part of the new law that we passed. Why don't you explain that just a little bit?
So pre-registration, 16 and 17-year-olds can register to vote. They will not be on the voters list until they turn 18, but they don't have to worry about rushing to register to vote when they turn 18. They will automatically be registered. The state has a queue in their central voter registry system. They are sitting in that queue until their birthday, and then they get registered.
So, piggybacking on people registering to vote, if you're 16 or 17, how would you register to vote?
You just either come into my office and fill out a voter registration form, download a form off my website, the town clerk's website, download a form off of the state's website, mass.gov. You can register at the Registry of Motor Vehicles when you get your license. And
So
so
if you go and get your license when you're 16 and a half, can you pre-register at that time?
yes. Yep.
Which is brand spanking new
Yes.
For a lot of people. And again, I think the goal for the legislature and for so many other voting groups is we want to ensure that as many people do register to vote and actually get out and vote, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible. And this new bill that was passed into law is a first step toward that goal for many of us. When you talk about the website locally, because I know a lot of these kids, know the computer better than you and I do.
They do.
What do you know what the website is?
It's
actually
ipswichma.gov, and then if you go under government on the home page, go to the town clerk's page. On the left-hand side, it says elections and registrations, and there will be all kinds of information on registering to vote, absentee ballots, early voting, registering, anything you can think of, and there are links to the state website off of my website.
And your phone number here, if someone wanted to call you, is?
978-356-6677.
Something that comes up during elections, and I'm going to cheat a little bit, called non-respondents to the annual street list. Can you talk about a little bit about the process for people who come and vote, and then there's an issue literally at the election that you have to pull people aside and explain? Can you explain that particular issue?
State statute requires everyone to respond to the census. If they haven't responded to the census by the first Monday in June, we need to designate them as inactive. So when you come to, if you're designated as inactive and you come to the polls, you must come to the little desk that I have there and fill out an affirmation of current and continuous residence to swear that you are currently a resident of Ipswich. And you must present ID with your Ipswich address that agrees with what the voter registration that we have on record shows. So in order to make it easier for everyone, and so they won't have to go through this, I have sent recently, the last couple of weeks, sent out notices, again, second census notices, and have requested that people return them so they won't have to go through that process. It's not a hard process, but you have to remember to bring your ID with you. You have to sign the affirmation, and then you'll have to hop back into line to get to vote.
And to be clear, what type of identification would they need?
Oh,
what would
we're
they bring?
pretty lenient on your anything with your name and your address on it. So driver's license is preferable because it's got everything on it. Bank statement, even if your prescription has your name and address on it, we'll take a look at the bottle and just anything that has your name and your Ipswich address on it. Your car registration. Most people don't walk to the Y because it's kind of far from most places in Ipswich. So we will take your driver's license registration. You usually have that in your car.
And the letter that you just sent out, were those people who had not responded yet?
Yes.
So not to the whole town?
No, just to the people who have not responded.
And so it would behoove, if they get that letter, and they probably would have received it by now, that they should immediately give you a call
Yes.
or come down to the town clerk's desk
Yes.
and get back on, make sure you're on the rolls.
Correct.
Because again, those lines are going to be awfully, awfully big for this election, and we don't want you to have to be taken out of line and then get put back in.
Correct. And we also sent out, when we made them inactive, according to the statute, we mailed out what we call confirmation mailing cards. And those ask you if you are currently living in Ipswich at the same address, have moved within town, or have moved out of town. So we sent those out also. So if somebody has one of those, they can certainly return that instead of that census form.
So explain to me provisional ballots. What is a provisional ballot?
Provisional ballots can be issued to someone whose name is on the list and has has been made inactive, and who has not any ID on them at the time of their appearance to vote. They must, though, bring ID before 8 o'clock.
Okay.
So that's one provisional ballot. If the person is registered, and this wouldn't pertain to this particular election, but it would pertain to a primary, if they're registered to vote in one party on our records, but they claim they're registered to vote in a different party, then they can take the party ballot that they feel they were registered in. We take those provisional ballots and we bring them back to the office the next day. We do a lot of research. We send to the Registry of Motor Vehicles an inquiry. We check all our records for voter registration that we have on them. And if we find that it's an error on our part, then that ballot can be counted. If we find that it's not, then the ballot is not counted.
Okay.
So we adjust our totals according to whether or not we counted it.
But if someone actually has a question whether they are on the rolls or not, they really should be calling you as soon as
Yeah,
possible.
they can call us now. It would be better to call before October 19th.
Well, it seems to
because-
me as though you really have done some outreach to try and reach these folks. And again, that was the argument as a state, is that we were putting up roadblocks to people being able to vote, and we're trying now to reach out to people who we know may have an issue with the street listing or not. And you've done actually a very good job of that, and,
Thank you.
and we're appreciative of that.
Thank you. We're always willing to answer the question. It's much easier to answer it ahead of time than to be at the polls and have a little...
I know smaller towns like Ipswich and the Hamiltons and the Wenhams of the world, you know, we don't run into a lot of these issues, but recently they seem to be popping up more and more at these smaller levels. Usually it's done in the urban centers,
Right.
where there's a lot more people, but I think the law that we passed is a good law and sets us down the right path in ensuring that most people vote who deserve to vote and have the right to vote. Another question that often comes up, certainly as someone who's in the political game, but for those of us, or for those who aren't, there is a limit to where people can stand when they're actually trying to support a candidate. So if someone, for example, if someone wanted to hold a sign for me or something like that, there are laws and limits that people need to understand. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, the law states that you cannot hold any political pamphlets, signs, but have any buttons, anything within 150 feet of the polling location. Our marker is on one of the light poles in the middle of the parking lot, and it's a big yellow and red sign that says no political canvassing beyond this point. So anyone who wants to hold a sign, wants to keep their political buttons on, must be outside that point.
And usually for us, that would be at the entrance of the YMCA and the VFW driveway.
Yes.
But for example, something has recently come up, and I think you've been contacted about it. We in Ipswich are trying to reach out to our senior citizens about tax programs that are available to them. And we're wondering if we're allowed, and I say we, or a nonprofit organization that might want to hand out information about a certain group, are we allowed to hand things out to people in line if it has nothing to do with the election that's at hand?
As long as you're outside the 150-foot mark.
So that also qualifies?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
You can, well, I should take that back. You can, but in our YMCA, there's one entrance in, one entrance out. It gets very congested. So that's why we don't allow anybody to be passing things out there. And we found over the years that really has caused some problems with who's getting in the line and how the line is flowing. And we certainly, especially on this election, wouldn't want to impede the flow of this,
Sure.
the people.
But if this was like a selectman's race, for example, where not as many people come out to vote, would that be something that you would entertain? It would be left up to the clerk, am I correct?
Yes, and I would have to be able to preview their materials
Yeah.
to make sure.
Is there anything else that you can think of that we haven't covered in regarding not only to early voting and absentee ballots and things of that sort that you'd like to talk about in regards to this upcoming election? Any suggestions maybe, or?
Well, I just think people should realize how many voters we have. We have 10,700 voters as of today, which is a lot. So if 80% come out, that's a lot of traffic. And I understand it's really difficult. You want to get in and vote and get out, but our lines are pretty good. Nobody sticks around to linger, or that's why I don't
hand things out.
So if you just have a little patience with that, you can probably get in and out pretty easily. There's only 10 minutes that the person can stay in the voting booth.
Okay.
So it's not going to be real long. It sounds like a long time, but it really isn't going to be that long. I would caution you, though, there are 4 questions on the ballot, and I think that if you preview those and make your decision before you get to the polls, because they're written in such a fashion that it's hard to understand sometimes for some people whether they want to vote yes or no. It's very tricky. So if they preview those and know how to vote, how they want to vote, it will speed things along.
And they would be allowed to bring in the red book, right?
They can bring in the red book.
So if they check it off.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, even
my mother used to do that. So
even I bring a little cheat note for whether I want a yes or no on the question. And also, they. I just lost my train. But it would be better for them.
It would behoove them to educate themselves on it.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Well, thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to come talk to us about the early voting.
It's a pleasure.
I'll tell you another thing that I want people to know in Ipswich, especially our senior citizens, if you do need a ride to the polls, if you were to contact the Ipswich Council on Aging, which is 978-356-6650, they'd be willing to send the van to your house and bring you down so that you can vote if that makes it easier for you. And if you have any questions, you've already given us your phone number. You want to give it to us one last time?
Yes, absolutely. 978-356-6677.
And 978-356-6650 for the Ipswich Council on Aging. Again, thank you for coming down and talking to us about this.
It was a pleasure.
This has been another great edition of A View from the Hill, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.